This is no bullshit gaming podcast, 2.5 gamers. Sharing actionable insights, dropping knowledge from our day-to-day user acquisition, game design, and ad monetization jobs. We are definitely not discussing the latest industry news, but having so much fun. Let's not forget this is a 4 a.m. conference discussion vibe, so let's not take it too seriously.
In person, so this is a live session. Obviously it's not live, but it will be next week. Well, I guess this week.
Where are we recording? Where are we?
Oh well, we are in Vegas. We're recording at MAU conference, which is amazing, and we have Tiffanie and Greg with us, our great sponsors as well. And we're talking about the UA, all the fun stuff. But before we do that, let's do a round of intros. So let's start with let's
start ladies first.
Yeah.
Start with Tiff here.
Yeah.
So Tiffanie here, Senior UA Manager at Mistplay. I've been in the industry about 4 years now. Started off at Playtika Montreal studio for about 2 years, working at with World Series of Poker, and then launching new games as well, namely Cat Force. And it's about 21 months that I've been at Mistplay, managing both UA and the retargeting efforts.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's
Nice.
Nice.
Very tough act to follow here. No.
The mighty Playtika.
Yeah. No, Greg Pang, Director of UA for Mistplay. I've been in the industry for about 15 years now, which seems like, am I dating myself?
Yeah.
No, it seems like a long time, and I've spent about the past 8 to 9 years specifically in the mobile space. I think, amongst this conversation, and we're at MAU, probably one of the most relevant experiences is my time at Jam City. I spent about 3 years there leading the UA team, worked on titles, acquiring users in Panda Pop, Disney Emoji Blitz, Harry Potter, Hogwarts Mystery.
You worked on the title from the Colombian team as well?
No, World War Doe. Yeah. I worked on some of the soft launch pieces, but in 2019, when I left, they were just going into kind of the next phase of development. But great game, by the way, great concept. That's it. And maybe the timing wasn't there, right? The PvP Royal Rumble style. So.
I remember we
Bit too late. Yeah, we were both working.
We were working
on it,
with that game, and we were in
Nice.
Bogota for the Colombia 4.0 conference.
Okay.
We met the team and started talking to them, and then afterwards we just briefly worked with the Jam City team.
Yeah, they have a lot of great talent down in South America, really. A lot of good studios doing good stuff.
Yeah. Latam, lots of players as well.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Look, you both have the experience from the gaming as well. How that translates into what you're doing at the moment? Because I imagine it's quite different. Right?
Yeah.
Like how do you compare the gaming versus what you're doing?
Yeah, it's. I would say it kind of straddles two different categories in that, we are a cash in, cash out rewards app, right? So we kind of fall in the category of entertainment and lifestyle, but we are in the gaming industry in that we feature hundreds of games and we allow, our community of over 1 million gamers plus to access their favorite titles. So it's interesting just because the scope of who we can acquire isn't just a casual player or isn't just an RPG, right? It's everybody in the gaming industry or the gaming ecosystem plus people who want, deals or people who want, gift cards. So our range of the audience that we're looking at and we're acquiring is a lot more broad. So that's definitely, an advantageous place to be in.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you...
To add on the creative side, I think to echo what Greg said, it's like we can target as broad as we want, as well as specific as we want, depending on our strategy, as well as working with our partners. Like you said, we have like the casual gamers, the RPG gamers that we can target, specifically with our creatives, as well as just general people who are into like the reward earning space.
What's the strategy then?
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask a follow-up question there because I'm known as the third best UA manager on the podcast, which means I don't really know that much about UA, but I'm just super curious, why does Mistplay work and how does it work? And why does it work so well? Because Matej told me it works really well.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of ways to think about it. So, Mistplay as the value proposition is the number one loyalty, game or ecosystem for mobile gamers, right? And so, people look at Mistplay as a loyalty-driven media source, essentially, right? We have kind of a full feedback loop, a full ecosystem where, we acquire the user, users come to Mistplay to download their favorite titles, right? They get rewarded by playing those games, by getting units, by getting gems and in-game currency, and on the back end, they can actually exchange those units and those gems for real cash rewards. So it's a win-win situation for the user, it's a win-win situation for the actual client that we're working with, because through the power of loyalty, we can drive engagement, we can drive ROI and long-term LTV. So.
Okay.
So if I summarize that, it's like the power of rewards, rewarding users, a little bit of money as well.
There's a little bit of incentive on the user side, but I think largely the way to think about it and articulate it is leveraging and harnessing the power of loyalty to drive acquisition.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that translate to the KPIs you have?
Yeah, great question. So I would say there's two ways to think about it, but in the context of this conversation, let's just talk about the demand piece, right? For us, there's going to be a subset of primary and secondary KPIs. Of course, every game and every publisher is going to be different, right? There is no one size fits all. However, we look at things largely the same as some publishers out there in terms of performance is always going to be king for us, right? $1 spent and $1 returned. So return on ad spend is really one of the primary KPIs that we look at from a day-to-day operational basis.
Okay, and how do you measure that? If you drive the players that actually play the games, and then you kind of measure the ROI on the other side of the business.
Yeah, so there's two layers, right? I know it gets a little bit complex, right?
That's what we want.
So again, I think we should kind of frame the conversation in terms of just what we look at from the demand perspective and not the ad network media source side, right? So in terms of
is like the ad network portion, is it calculated in the LTV or not?
The ad network portion, so we technically have a couple of LTVs that we're working with, right? Our own proprietary LTV, as well as how we think of just downstream client performance. But again, from the perspective of how we think about, LTV to CAC and acquisition cost, it's how much we spend to acquire the user from whatever ad network that we're working with, and the CPI that we're essentially charging the client. So that's typically how we look at $1 spent to acquire and $1 that we're getting in return.
It sounds pretty complicated.
I think it's complicated if it's the first time that you've gotten exposure to, let's say, loyalty apps, cash rewards based apps. But I think when it comes down to it, it's best articulated in kind of two different models. And for this conversation, it's the first demand-driven model.
So what's like the secret behind Mistplay and like why it's become so supercharged? You guys have been growing like crazy. Like there's a lot of rewards apps out there, but what's the difference actually? Is it the scale only, or is there anything else?
Yeah, I'll
I would say
tee it up to Tiff.
Really, I think Greg mentioned it. Performance is king. I think just being really on top of it, being really strict about our targets and reaching those with our partners and working with all the UA partners to reach those goals, which essentially translate into good performance for our clients. And they come back to us for this good performance. I think that has really boosted our reputation as well, helped our scale. I would say game selection is definitely a big plus with Mistplay. We have over like 200, 300 games.
Don't quote us on the number, but there's a growing portfolio of games available on Mistplay.
We have some of the big titles as well. So, I think it's listening to our community and like trying to figure out like what do they like, what do they want, and also trying our best to like provide that for our users as well.
So if I understand it correctly, so if you do your job and you suck, then the other way of the business suck as well.
Exactly. So we like to refer this as kind of like a full flywheel effect. Is if we drive bad users, into the
You're very
ecosystem,
good at what you do.
and
Yes. Oh, wow.
and the clients, right, see bad performance, then the flywheel doesn't work, right? But if we're doing our jobs, we're driving the requisite quality into the app, then the clients are happy at the end of the day. It's a delicate balance. I don't want to say it's a black or white thing, like we do our jobs, then the clients are happy. There's always going to be instances where we need to balance things, right? And so I would say that things aren't always linear, and we need to work very, very closely with cross-functional stakeholders, right? Whether that means the product team, whether that means the sales and commercial organizations, whether that means the data analysts that we work with on a day-to-day basis to unlock insights, right? It's an entirely team-led effort. It's not just the UA piece. There's a lot of different components of the business that need to work together in order for things to work.
So if I break it down, is the curation and it's the cross-functionality and...
Yes.
Can we just get like one more keyword?
I would. Curation is a really good word. I think our sales team does a really good job of keeping their pulse to the market and seeing and knowing what our community wants, right? In terms of, let's say, the top 300 titles, right? I also think that and again, not speaking to what the competition is doing, but I think our product is very elevated and very elegant in terms of being personalized and data-driven. I think if you talk to anybody, on our ELT team, or really anybody out there, we're an AI almost first data-driven company, and so our product really
before AI got popular.
Yeah, before AI got popular, before ChatGPT. Mark our words. Before it was a buzzword, we really hung our hat on being a data-first, personalized, hey, you give us some inputs and we'll personalize your, what we call the mix list or the games list, right? Based on your preference. So, yeah. Okay. I would throw AI into that into that buzzword.
Okay, so curation, AI.
Yes, exactly.
Web3.
Metaverse.
Yeah.
But, so, does it make any difference if you onboard a new game into your app in terms of the UA? Like, have you seen any differences? Like, hey, so Raid Shadow Legends on Mistplay now. You use it in the UA. How does that work?
Yeah, I'll tee it up to Tiff and I'll kind of reinforce or back up anything.
Yeah, I think if it's a huge title, we usually be in collaboration with commercial team and know that it's coming and we're prepping and looking forward to hopefully the uptake in performance. But we've also done some partnership as well, collaboration with some of the big titles where if they give us the rights to advertise their title and letting them know that, hey, Mistplay is onboarding a really big game, then that's kind of the collaboration we try to do. That being said, it does require more product features and product updates. We've tested it previously, and then I think we're still fine-tuning, let's say, the straight deep linking type of technology. I see you shaking your head. It's not easy. Yeah.
Always. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to reinforce that, I would say in some cases, yes. In other cases, no. If it's a big title, if it's a smash hit, they're willing to put a lot of dollars and budget around it, then it absolutely has a pretty big impact on kind of the overall business or the day-to-day operation. But let's say if it's a smaller title, there's not as much, let's say, buzz around it, it's probably going to be less of a impact to the overall. So it really is case by case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say if you work with Marvel Snap, does it make difference for you guys in terms of the UA?
Well, it really depends on how much budget they're willing to put behind it, right? However, I mean, again, that's more of a diplomatic answer, but it also really depends, right? It's case by case because some partners are very open for us to use their IP, right? Or to use different things, right? Which
so it's more about not the budget, but if you can use their IP rather.
It's a bit of both, right? And so there's a bit of balance that we have to kind of approach the partner with.
Do gaming companies look down at the fact that it's a rewarded app, kind of rewarded?
No, absolutely not. I think I mean, if they look down upon it, they wouldn't be spending with Mistplay, right? And so
sometimes they don't even understand it.
yeah, well, at the end of the day, I think for a lot of publishers, because they view Mistplay as a media source, if the performance is there and we're driving quality, if they're driving quality users, then I wouldn't say it almost doesn't matter, but the bottom line is they're getting the user base that they want, and they're able to spend their budget. So.
Okay.
How much have you spent on Mistplay?
Yeah, how much was that? How much was that hat, by the way?
That
was free of charge.
Look, so I was actually adding Mistplay like a few years back when you didn't even have the ROAS algo.
Yeah.
I was all like CPI based, and it was already like back then like working quite well. so now I guess it's working better. But I wanted to ask, like you mentioned, like cross like team and department communication, like and process. Like how does that work? I mean, like that sounds like really like a lot of work.
Yeah. I would say, at this stage of growth in Mistplay, we're still only 200 people, right? And so
only 200. Come on,
I mean, you talk to some of these larger gaming studios, they're like 800, 1,000 people, right? Fair enough. From looking at kind of our scale, how much we're spending, how much we're expected to generate in terms of revenue, we're still relatively like a pretty agile team, right? So we have task forces, we have pods, we have pretty streamlined ways of communicating to other teams, right? I would say at the core of what we do sits data enablement and data analytics, and I don't want to say they drive all the decisions, but they are a key stakeholder in everything that we do. So data kind of sits at the middle and supports us, sales and commercial, and the product team to kind of do what we do. So we have a pretty good working relationship with all the teams across the company.
Working on site or remote?
Remote. Well, I'm in Montreal, so the head office is there. But like Greg is sitting in New York. But we get the opportunity of I think 2 times a year of having a company all hands where we bring everyone to Montreal and have a working session, kind of foster that collaboration even further. Yeah.
Is it working well?
Yeah.
Meeting people?
I mean, it did. It's very exhausting for sure. It's the same as being at MAU right now. But really being able to sit next to my data analyst and talk through things and understand each other better, what exactly you're looking at, what exactly I'm looking at, definitely helps. Yeah.
Okay. And talking about the data, what kind of sources you are running actually the UA on? How does it look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our UA sources.
UA sources.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, looking at the overall media source portfolio, because we do operate in the gaming space and we are acquiring users for gamers, right? It's going to be
different, right?
It's different, right? To our earlier point in terms of us having a wider audience, that helps us. But in terms of the channels, it's going to be pretty much in line with, let's say, a King or a PlayerX or a Jam City, right? They're almost tapping into some of the same user pools, right? Well. Which makes it a little bit harder, but you look at our media portfolio and it's definitely heavy on, let's say, self-attributed networks, right? Your Googles and your Facebooks of the world. And then we're also reliant on direct SDKs, right? We're also doing a lot with DSPs. But I think across our media portfolio, the one thing that potentially makes us the most exciting, and maybe I speak for both of us, is some of the non-traditional kind of sources that we've seen work well, that we think are going to be very sustainable for the future. We talk about CTV. Yeah. It's probably every single panel and every single talk at MAU on the agenda this year is talking about connected TV, right? I think it's definitely one of those things that has the potential to become really, really huge. I think the stat was 85% of all US households
household.
have an OTT or a CTV streaming device, right? And so there's huge potential because the device penetration is there. I think it's still early days in terms of making it work purely from a gaming perspective. And I think Tiff could add on.
I think what's interesting is that when we first started testing like CTV, we thought that it would be more of a brand play.
Yeah.
I think that was everyone's expectation, more like awareness. But I think the CTV partners know that as UA managers, we're really performance driven, and it really needs to nail down like ROAS and the tracking and attribution correctly. Obviously, it's not perfect right now, but from our experience, it's actually better than we expected. We would say.
Perfect. Okay,
Have you
so how does that
tested?
work? No, I have a CTV on my list for this year,
Yeah.
but it requires like really big amount of budgets as well.
What's a big amount? When you say big amount?
Not
necessarily,
necessarily. I think now that it has become available across some of these larger networks, right? Unnamed here, but you can start with smaller budgets.
Can you define smaller budget though? Like what kind of range?
Let's call it 500 to 1,000 a day, right? That's on the smaller
Is that smaller
side
or
of
big?
things,
That's small.
right?
50
That's
and
like
20K a month.
that's like a standard test budget,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think there's some real legs and some real opportunity there. I think we're still early in terms of the inventory coming online, right? And also the ability to bid into those inventory sources on more of a programmatic level, right? I think they're still trying to figure those components out, but I think really the sky's almost the limit if we can make it work from a programmatic and a scalable piece.
So how does it work for you? So, I mean, you don't need to say like who are you working with, but from the day 1 to let's say day 30 and the ROAS afterwards, what's the journey look like? Because everybody's like, oh well, we need to go to the CTV. It's like, yeah, let's do it. That's it. Nobody knows. Like,
Full stop. That's it.
Full stop. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I
Let's
mean,
do it.
I would say now that the attribution piece is quote unquote figured out, right? And they figured out a way to, attribute based on a view or based on your household IP, right? Now that that's less of a concern, you almost treat it as a normal performance campaign or a normal performance channel, right? If it's not performing to your early or your D30 ROAS goals, yes, you kind of want to consider it a little bit differently just because the view-through component is there. But at the end of the day, if the performance is not there or there, then you consider scaling it up.
So how do you define the view-through component in the whole CTV performance?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to I think look at it. There is the pure directly attributed attribution that you get from it through things like QR codes, right? And then from a view-through standpoint, you're doing an IP match, right? And you're relying on that. However, there is kind of this multi-touch assisted install piece that you have to consider that isn't directly baked into reporting, and that's something that we work with our data analysts and our data analytics teams.
Yeah, of course, it's like track.
And we work with our data analysts to understand that and come up with a model that is going to be closer to the truth, right? You're never going to get the 100% truth, but if you have a model and if you have a framework, welcome to UA, right? So as long as you have some kind of framework, some kind of model in place to help you get closer to the truth, I think you're in better position. So,
the one thing I would add, I think the creative piece is a little different. So you would have to do a little bit more legwork before launching. I feel like with our other kind of like UA partners, it's the classic like we have the concept, we have a top winning creative, and then you kind of like push it across all of the UA partners, and it usually will work out. But for CTV, I think it required like more sophisticated type of like design work behind it, and the QR code.
What does that mean?
It's almost like it's almost
less
like
scrappy.
It's almost like a completely different set of assets that you have to think about and ideate and produce and test on, right? For example, the orientation typically is a lot more landscape and has to be a lot more premium than, let's say, a 12 to 13 second video that you're going to serve on Facebook stories, right? Or Instagram stories. You also have to consider things like audio, right? Audio is a huge component in connected TV because people are listening, more oftentimes than not on their devices. Whereas in mobile, traditionally, let's say on Facebook, right, people were looking at their newsfeed with sound off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So things like that, very niche learnings that you have to bake into your creative production and your iterations are things that you unlock by doing the testing.
In the case of like creative concepts, do you need to have like different concepts, or like you said, like if you have a winner, but you put audio, that works, or like it's completely different?
I would say it doesn't go too far off. Like I think one of the creatives that had worked well in the past is like an explainer, kind of like a 3-step, like what our app is about. So we kind of like reiterated that, but like with nicer kind of like assets and resolution and more like of a walkthrough, because like once again, like on mobile app you can just click on it and it'll lead you to the app store, versus like on TV, like there's more hand holding, I guess, or that's the concept like we've been testing out. It's still early to figure out if there is like specific creatives for this audience, but we're generally working off of like our top creative, or at least the knowledge of what we know works well for us.
Yeah, I think that Tiff is exactly right in that the components of like a good creative on traditional mobile and CTV, like the bones are going to be there, like foundationally, right? Good storytelling, good value proposition, strong call to actions. Those things draw parallels, across mobile and across CTV. However, to my earlier point and Tiff's point just now, it has to have a bit more premium feel to it. It has to maybe index a little bit more on the storytelling, because you also get a little bit longer format in some cases, right? So those would be the main differences. But again, the parallels are there.
Can you show your CTV ads in the post-production afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're definitely leaning a little bit more on animated to tell the story within CTV versus,
The UGC.
and we'll talk about it in the creative section, but we're relying heavy on UGC to tell our story, right, and to tell our value proposition in traditional media. So that's an example of where maybe that doesn't match up in terms of CTV versus traditional, but there are cases where they do draw a lot of parallels.
Okay, before we go to the creative section, I mean, how do you even test the new UA channels, and how often do you add the new UA channels, and like how often do you retest the channels that didn't work before? Because that's important as well.
Yeah, you want to talk about the retest?
The retest?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because we're at MAU, and I feel like this is a good opportunity to speak with our past partners. Really seeing what's up and what's new with their products, if it's like new inventory, new algorithm, and their product, and listening to kind of like the industry too, right? Like speaking to other like UA managers, and sometimes like you hear like, hey, like I've been testing with this partner and it's been doing really well. That adds to the case of like, maybe we should give these guys another try. It's also good on our partners to reach out once like every quarter or like half a year and be like, letting us know what's up as well. That's kind of like how we approach it. Otherwise,
how you approach the retest in terms of the campaign and the budget, because it's also like you already spend few dollars here and there on the channel, so you need to be.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think the way that we would see it is like retesting it as a new partner, like the same guidelines of like, do you hit our targets once again? Obviously, there's partners who do offer some credits. I'm sure you would know.
Good old classic.
That helps, right? Especially since we know that we've invested with you previously and it didn't work out. Like, give us a little to ease kind of like our mind about it as well. But I would say we view it as any new partner and our existing partner, kind of like the targets that we need to hit, the time frame. We do it pretty much the same way. I don't know if you had
No, I think that's the perfect way of articulating it. But I would say in general, testing and experimentation, and I think the thread that you pull out of that is diversification of media sources is something that you constantly need to do, right? It's an evergreen thing. Yeah, there you go.
Admon as well,
Yeah, there you go. In
that we talk about too much.
in admon, in product, in data, it's an always ongoing evergreen testing and
applies to everyone
experimentation,
and
right? So I would say that never goes away, right? There's always a need to test new sources. There's always a need to do new things.
Yeah.
There's always a need to find new audiences, to find new inventory, whether that comes in the form of a new partner or whether that comes in the form of a retest. It almost doesn't matter as long as we're finding those new audiences, right?
Okay, so let's get back one step and like how do you find the new sources? The first question, then like how
MAU.
MAU, and then what else? Like,
No, I mean,
best parties at MAU. And
yeah, no, there's we have.
like UA sources. Like 2.5 gamers like next year. We are having like a new inventory for all of you UA managers.
We're starting an affiliate cowboy network.
There you go.
Call it cowboy networks. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
This works.
No, we have like many resources dedicated to going out there, keeping our ear to the ground, seeing like the movers and shakers, right? Who's new to the industry, and I think we pride ourselves on going out there and having the good conversations and really figuring out, because there's a lot of fluff out there, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. In the
Majority.
I mean, look, I'm not
Today
gonna.
is like 6 dinners.
Yeah, don't quote us on it. But there's a lot of need to wade through that fluff and see at the end of the day, you know, who the players are and what are the actual technologies and products that are driving UA.
How do you
right?
try to navigate in the fluff? Like, do you talk to other UA managers?
We have to have a lot of conversations, whether it be with the UA vendors themselves, to your point, with our peers and other UA buyers and managers. So it's always good to have that kind of network that you can reach out to and say, hey, you know, how did this partner work for you, or how did this source work for you? Again, it's not always going to be one-to-one because there are going to be specific business models that work with specific media sources, but it's good to have your ear to the ground and your pulse to like what's working.
No, like for me as a consultant, what works for like few games doesn't necessarily work for other games, but at least I'm like, oh well, this is working for this game. Oh, let's try it for this game as well.
Yeah,
that's perfect. And when I talk to other guys, it's always very helpful. So how do you define the KPIs for the test of the partners? Because that's like something that I've like tried multiple times and I find it really challenging, because it's always like, so I spend, let's say, 10K as a test budget, Unity. I finally get to the ROAS point of campaigns, like, oh, well, okay, fine. Now is the real performance happening. So I need to spend another 10K, and then, okay, so now I spent 20K, but performance is not getting anywhere. Should I stop it? Should I keep it? How do you are trying to look at that?
Conundrum.
Yeah.
That's a good question, and it's funny because I've gone through that phase as well. Trying to decide,
every UA manager.
Yeah, like,
it.
do we keep? Do we stop? Does it get better? Does it not? But
usually no.
Unfortunately,
Usually no.
I would say we have a general like test budget that we establish for every partner, but I think it's a very open conversation. It has to be, right? Two-way street, kind of like figuring out what is the expectations and what's the timeline. Like, what is the learning phase that we're expecting? What's the optimization phase? And what's the scale phase? And like weekly check-ins, like, did we hit it? Did we not? I would say, like, I think 1 to 2 months is kind of like our time frame, depending on which partner. Once again, sometimes the learning phase.
Let's say Unity.
Unity.
Yeah. So you start a campaign in Unity, Germany. What happens? How much money you need to spend, and then like how long does it take to evaluate the?
I think the best practice is generally like 2 weeks for the algorithm to learn, depending on what campaign you're launching as, right? Because CPI campaigns, like straight away, you would know what's the performance. And there's also that factor, right? Usually partners will ask you, start with the CPI campaigns, and then roll up to the next level, and then roll up to like a ROAS targeting campaign. I would say by the time we get to the ROAS like level, I would give it another like 2 to 3 weeks usually. We should be able to start seeing kind of like the D7 mature data and like how that rolls out. How does that hit our kind of like short-term targets of D7, which obviously impacts our LTV like on a long term. If it doesn't hit it, it's a conversation. Optimization, guys, you guys need to work towards the target. Are we gonna get there or not? They're definitely gonna do their best to reach it. Probably another 2 weeks if it doesn't hit it. And we have other sources for Germany who's able to get better installs, then that's when we're like, all right, it's not working.
Okay, so 2 months. What kind of budget are you looking at?
It really depends.
Everything is dependent. Everything
No, again,
no,
I'm
no,
gonna give
no,
the
no,
I'm
don't depend.
I'm gonna
No,
give
it
the I'm gonna
depends.
give the business school answer. However, for us
For us,
personally,
yeah.
it's gonna be anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a day at the minimum.
Okay,
at the minimum, right? So you're looking at 15 to 30K a month. And I would say, to add on to Tiff's point, not every partner is going to be linear. Not every partner is going to be like, I'm going straight to the top, right? D7 ROAS is going to be amazing coming out of the gate, right?
That's always what
Right?
always they say.
Right.
That's-
But as long as we have the clear communication, the alignment, and also the acknowledgement that things aren't just going to go straight up, right?
Okay.
They might ebb and flow. It might go down. We make an optimization. This happens. We blacklist some site IDs or whatever. Whatever it is, as long as there's acknowledgement on both ends that we're making the necessary optimizations and they're being communicated both ways, and they're seeing improvement week over week, I think that's one of the most important pieces. Because again, after 2 weeks, you're not going to see your D7 goals hit. But as long as you're seeing consistent improvement towards your goals and you're still able to maintain that scale, right? I think that's a case where you would want to keep testing a partner, right? So.
What's the key testing geo for you guys? Is it US only or trying to expand?
Yeah, so I think one of the distinctions of us as kind of a loyalty-based app and us, different from like a game publisher, we don't really have like the soft launch period and we don't have the technical launch period. When we want to test a partner, we almost go right into the live environment, which means like North America, US based mostly, straight away.
So US, okay. And so how many UA channels are you working with at the moment?
All of them?
All of them?
Every single one. Yeah, no. It really depends. not to say, I'm sorry,
but monetization is so much more interesting.
Can we get a depend counter on this? No. We're probably in a given month working with anywhere from like 10 to 20 UA partners, right? And it goes back to like the constant testing and experimentation, right? We want to have a consistent pipeline of new partners and new tests, and that just adds on, right? That's why I kind of give a range, because in any given month we can be testing 3 to 6 to probably not 10, but within that range of new media sources.
What is your calculation decimals tell you about the budget they're spending?
Millions.
No, but it can be close to anything about 1 million a month at least.
For testing?
No, for like a whole UA, I guess.
For us?
Yeah.
Oh, it's well into the million, like multi-millions. So if you think about that and you take, let's say, 5% of that multi-million-dollar budget, that's like a pretty good testing, pipeline or budget. So.
Okay, so then how many creatives you are testing it actually, and where are you testing it?
I'm not going to give that answer. No.
If you say depends on ask you how you are, and you're going to be like, depends.
Depends, you're leaving it.
I will answer that question with some numbers. I will spare you from it.
How many creatives?
We aim about like 10 to 14 creatives per week. And that's almost like 40 to 50 per month. It really depends on... So sorry. It is driven by the performance need that we have, really the creative fatigue that we're seeing, as well as our design capacity. But that is our aim. We've had points where we're really in a flow of getting all the creatives out, as well as testing. So creative testing, we do it every 2 weeks, kind of time frame. Sometimes about 7 to 14 days. Sometimes it could be shorter. Sometimes it could be generally not longer.
How does it work?
So there's two platforms that we use to test creatives.
TikTok and Facebook.
Sorry?
TikTok and Facebook.
That's a good guess.
You got one out of
50%,
two.
right?
Facebook is not a guess. It's kind of.
That's kind of
Given.
it's kind of the standard,
It's like
right?
the playbook at this
I
point.
don't
Yeah.
even do UA, and I know that.
So we have, I guess, an interesting spin to it is that we do Facebook, so one social network, another one more of a SDK, so that we can see if this creative, the top winning creative, is consistent across all partners, and that will give us that confidence to launch it across
What does
the rest of
SDK
it.
network rhyme with? You can name it. Yeah.
Unity.
It's Unity.
It is Unity. I think those are the two platforms that allows you to have separate creative campaigns,
You're
as well as
using
the A/B
creative
testing.
beta.
Yes.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And
How does that work? Because like not everybody knows that there is a creative testing
yeah,
beta.
I think it was rolled out relatively recently.
Yeah, it's pretty new.
Yeah.
But we jumped on it the moment it was on beta, and it worked for us. Yeah. In
What's the
terms,
difference between like testing the using the creative testing campaign versus the normal campaign for creative testing?
I think it's giving the chance of all the creatives some delivery and some learning. That's like the best ideal way of testing creatives. There has been definitely times with other bigger partners where we just have to launch in BAU because they don't have that kind of like framework, and just see kind of like if it juggles with existing creatives or it doesn't, and then it just fizzles out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. Like, giving the creatives that you produced an actual shot to get the equal impression share or whatnot, right? A lot of times when you roll it into like business as usual campaigns, it's really hard to force that creative to get those impressions, right? So using Facebook and using the Unity creative tool, it gives us that fair chance to see that performance, right? So
And see the results as well.
yeah.
So what I try to do on Facebook at least is to have a creative testing campaign and then just put the winners in the business as usual. But I just relaunched the business as usual, just removed all the creatives that were performing before and just launched the new ones.
In the existing campaign.
Yeah,
and it works.
yeah.
Look,
It's
there is
just- I
no
like
like
so-
perfect
There's no
formula.
perfect science.
Yeah.
I've tried like all kinds of things.
I know. Like I tried like 4 different creative testing like variations, and it's like always changing anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to know what's happening like behind the scenes
Yeah,
in
exactly.
the
Especially
black
with
box.
Facebook.
But to your point, I think it's just important to try anything and everything, right? See what works for you. See what works for a specific creative.
What I also saw is that even if I launch or like add the winner creatives from the testing campaign into the business as usual, it takes like a week or 2 weeks to actually pick up the spend and actually start performing. When the winners start to decay, then the winners from the creative testing campaign just start to pick up. But it's like sometimes you don't have the patience to actually wait.
Yeah, 2 weeks is a long time.
I know. Okay. Okay. So we talked about a lot of things. So anything else then like besides the CTV? Oh no CTV.
Again?
Creatives, because you were showing us on, I think in January, the best performing creative from Mistplay, which
Yeah.
was the girl that was talking
Yeah.
to herself.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the creatives, and it's still up there. It's still performing well. That's nice. Okay.
You know, top creatives are really hard to beat sometimes.
Yeah.
No matter how much we try and iterate. Yeah.
That's amazing. And how does your creative process look like in terms of like the ideation phase? Because that's important. Like, how did you come up? First question: how did you come up with the concept that this person is talking to herself? If it was on your side, or it was on her side that actually like she came up with it.
Is this like someone, like, is it an influencer you paid to say exactly
Yeah.
these things? Or is it like you just
like,
run wild with it? Or
Think about it as like the classic UGC, right?
Okay.
We're paying an actor or an
Yeah.
influencer, right, to on our behalf to talk about Mistplay.
Okay.
Um,
So she came up with the concept and then.
Yeah.
So,
I would say,
yeah.
I'll start it off. I think the credit goes to our design team. They are really kind of like always.
You know which creative I'm
in the pulse.
talking about,
I
right?
know
Okay.
exactly
Yeah.
which one you're talking about.
yeah, we all know what we all know what it is.
yeah.
Really, our creative team is always checking kind of like what's trending, what's happening, and getting a pulse of it. And I think that one, I would like to say that we started off early on with the UGC concept, and I think it was just
we were talking about it in January, and
Yeah.
I think like that.
That creative, I think, was getting like 15% of overall like views
Yeah.
or impressions in some of the apps I was
And
managing.
it was already
so-
like a little bit later
Yeah.
than you started running in the camp, the creative for sure.
Yeah, so it was just, a design team kind of like had that idea and pitched it to the actor that like we hired, and she executed super well.
That's
It
amazing.
worked
That's
out.
amazing.
And
I'm
now
like,
she's
what the fuck
famous,
is
yeah.
happening? It's like,
Yeah.
How many impressions do you think you've shown that? Like at least a couple billion, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
definitely in
There.
it's definitely in the
Yeah.
millions.
Yeah.
It's definitely in the millions.
So that's kind of like how
Okay.
it came about. But honestly, working with the design team, it's a full feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
Ideation, we do it kind of like separately, but also together. We brainstorm kind of like on a monthly basis, like what are the trends we're seeing, what's relevant to us, how can we spin it the Mistplay way. Then there's the prioritization, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
for one of the sessions, we had like over 50, 60 like ideas. Obviously, they cannot be all executed at
Well,
once.
like you said, like you're testing like 15 creatives.
Yeah, that's true. But you got to pick and choose what we
know.
think has the best potential or impact. And so then there's that. Then it comes down to the UA team, right? For us to keep testing the creatives, be on track with our schedule. And then I think the most important part is relying the results and the learnings back to our design team and letting them know the great success of that
Yeah, yeah.
ad.
They can. Yeah. I'm
So
pretty
no one
sure
puts
they're
design
frust-
team in the corner. Yeah.
They're pretty frustrated because like this is
It's-
working so well for so long.
It's hilarious
How
because
can we beat that?
yeah, no matter where we are, you find that top creative, and it's such a satisfying feeling, right?
Yeah, it is.
But then months later,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
like,
find
oh my
like
god,
why.
it gets frustrating
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, that feeling. Yeah, and then the feedback goes back into the ideation once again and working together.
Okay, so how do you define the creative winner? Like, do you need like what, 100 installs, 500 installs, 50,000 impressions? How does that look like?
Once again, I think we're really driven by performance. So I think every UA manager has different KPIs,
yeah,
and
sure.
also by the app is different. For us, for sure, comes with the delivery. The IPM and the ROAS is really what we look at. The CPI obviously plays into it because it impacts the ROAS. Those are the metrics we truly look at. At the end of the day, we're very performance driven. So even if a creative has like amazing CTR, clearly attracts the audience, but we're not seeing the result back out, it's not something that we would run with.
Finally, fucking someone says the same thing that I'm talking about all the time. It comes down to ROAS all the time, even in the creative testing. Like, how can you pay salaries in IPMs? Seriously, nobody cares. Like, if the creative makes money, like,
that's gold.
Yeah.
I think IPM is a very good initial indicator. It's like a shallow indicator, right? Maybe there's some traction that we can create there, but again, if the creative doesn't retain and if it doesn't pay out and ROAS wise, like it doesn't necessarily make sense to, let's say, iterate on it, deem it a top performer, and continue to to go down that route. So.
Okay, and do you use any type of the latest trends in terms of the AI in the creatives?
It's a great question. We talked about ChatGPT earlier. It's definitely something that we've seen a lot more. We have talked to a lot of AI-driven creative performance, services. I think it's never going to completely replace what a designer does, but I think it's going to be, and it is already, and we've done some testing already, a powerful tool for concept testing, right? More on, let's say, the static side, right? ChatGPT, come up with a UGC, static 10 different ways. It allows you to deploy those concepts in a much quicker manner. So in that regard, I think there's going to be a lot of efficiencies that we can find in using like AI-driven tools. Yeah.
So you use it?
We currently use it more. We currently use it more for.
It depends.
We currently use it more for copy today, but we're definitely going down the route of doing our due diligence and seeing if it's going to make sense for us, like more sustainably and long term.
Well, because so I use a combination of ChatGPT and Midjourney.
Yeah.
So I asked ChatGPT to actually write me a creative brief for like 5 videos. for a certain game, and it gave
Crash
me-
and burn.
It gave. Let's call it crash
Yeah,
and burn.
yeah.
Crash and burn racing game.
Yeah.
Gave me like 5 very good concrete ideas with the potential audience and the tone of the creative and everything. It's like, wow, okay, this is pretty good.
Did you produce it
Yeah,
and test
I
it?
put it in the Mid Journey, in the static images, and it was like
Yeah.
very pretty good, really surprising. So some of the like static images were outperforming the static images I was using before. I
Interesting.
was like, okay, nice.
It's gonna be a very, very powerful tool. It's almost scary how
It's
like
very- it's
accurate
very-
it
it's
is.
very scary.
I think it also comes down to like how well you prompt it. Like you were talking about tone and
Yeah.
like that earlier. If you prompt it well enough, like put it in this
key,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
tone, like in this kind of style, then you're more likely to get like to the output that's going to resonate with the
Yeah.
audience, right? So it's a lot about like the prompting
Well, the
piece
prompt
too.
is very important, of course. I started experimenting with Midjourney like 6 months ago. I use it for my newsletter.
Yeah, all the time.
For the thumbnails all the time. And
Cat's out of the bag.
the evolution, well, unicorn is out of the bag. So the evolution that I've like came through is like, it was amazing. I was really bad at prompts. I mean, I'm still bad, but now I can like articulate what I'm trying to see in the image, and it's like very important. So if you're able to do that for the creatives,
It's a huge unlock. Yeah.
yeah, it's perfect.
Absolutely.
It can help you like be more efficient in terms of the creative process. So I produced one static image for one game, just like a food game, and I talked to my motion designer. I was like, hey man, like how long would it take for you to actually produce the creatives? Like 3 days maybe, like all the 3D
Yeah.
assets, I need to put them together. I was like, oh well man, like I made it in 5 minutes. So well,
But I think if you put it in the hands of the designer and you give them that tool, it's not necessarily they're going to replace what they're doing. I think the designer is going to be able to do so much more.
That's what I say. Like, look, David, you need to be very efficient and try to learn how to use this in your workflow.
Exactly.
Because this is not going to replace it. Like, I could see the flaws in the static image. I mean, they didn't
Yeah.
make any sense. But players, they don't care. Like, they don't care.
That's true.
Yeah.
They were like food didn't make any sense, but like visuals, like in general, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
So they could, oh wow, that's nice. They start paying afterwards in the game. So like, I guess nobody cares.
Yeah.
So
Let's-
that's what I explained. Like you need to be very efficient in what you do.
I think a good way to think about it, it's easier to work off of that, let's say, half-baked idea than to start
Oh, yeah.
from scratch, right? So you're saving like magnitudes of time,
Oh, yeah.
right? So I think that's a good way to think about.
I had 3 or 4 idea makers on the team, and now I have 1 because like the rest, like I don't have time, or just like, okay, well, guys, I don't need you anymore. I'm good with like trying to ideate stuff from ChatGPT and then use it with like the bank of the creative concepts that I worked with before, and the combination that just way more efficient.
Yeah, agree.
So we've been going for nearly an hour.
What are you trying to say?
I wanted to talk about admin stuff.
Okay, okay, you can.
So we talk a lot about UA. Like, is there anything like secret you guys are working on, or something you can say on the ad monetization side?
Not so much, and I overheard your conversation
Yeah,
with Aaron
yeah.
earlier,
I'm
but
trying to break it in.
not so much pure admon, right?
Yeah.
But as far as extending beyond just the native Android app, we have a lot of things in store that is a little bit more
talk about,
proprietary, I would
or-
say. Yeah, I think it was debuted at GDC, and
Yeah.
we talk a lot about Mistplay being the #1 loyalty platform for mobile gamers. We're thinking about it as a way to, I don't want to say commoditize because that almost cheapens it, but a way to manufacture loyalty as a service. So I will say that about it, in that we're thinking about how to take the model that works so well within the Mistplay ecosystem today and bring it beyond just Mistplay as an app.
you have any concrete examples how you guys are going to do that, or is that not what's announced?
Depends.
It
Yeah,
depends.
not specifically what has been announced, but in the coming weeks and months, it will definitely be a little bit more concrete. I don't even have 100% of the details, right? But it's super exciting to see what they're
Not going to be
working
an
on.
offer wall.
Not going to be an offer wall.
Sorry to disappoint.
Yeah.
Nice. Any other admin questions?
Well, that covers it. Yeah.
Short
and sweet.
Short and sweet.
I know.
I was
Yeah.
hoping for something more revealing.
Yeah,
but, you know.
short and sweet.
Yeah,
We'll have a
like-
conversation
In a few
after
months.
after the
I
podcast.
mean, I find admin a bit more interesting than you, I gotta say.
Yeah, fair.
No, we're actually pretty good. Should we wrap up and then just
Yeah.
go to the MAU and I guess see you next week, guys. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us. This was a great conversation.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much.